Chapter 1. The Disturbed Life of Wade Frankum. Wade Frankum was born on June 22, 1958 in New South Wales, Australia, into a working-class family. His early life was unremarkable in the public eye, yet it was filled with the kind of silent torment and emotional detachment that would ultimately ferment into unspeakable violence. From a young age, Wade exhibited signs of acute social withdrawal. School reports noted that he was quiet, obedient, but strangely absent in presence. Teachers described him as a boy who never looked you in the eye. He never played sports, never made lasting friendships, and often retreated into solitary activities like reading, watching television, or simply wandering his neighborhood alone. As he entered adolescence, Wade's behavior grew more visibly concerning. He displayed bouts of paranoia and developed a keen interest in dark, violent themes. He became obsessed with death, revenge, and alienation. He spoke of being misunderstood and began journaling erratically, entries that were later uncovered, detailing feelings of worthlessness, hatred towards society, and vivid violent fantasies. He was also diagnosed, unofficially, with traits consistent with schizoid personality disorder. He had no history of drug or alcohol abuse, no prior convictions, and no reported violent incidents, making him nearly invisible to authorities and mental health services. His emotional state deteriorated further in adulthood. After a failed attempt at living independently, Wade returned to live with his elderly mother in a small, sparsely decorated unit in Enfield, a suburb of Sydney. Neighbors described him as unnerving but not threatening. He walked in slow, circular patterns around his block at night, sometimes murmuring to himself. He rarely made eye contact, rarely responded to greetings. He was known by local shopkeepers as the man who always wore the same clothes: a faded army jacket, brown slacks, and scuffed boots, regardless of the weather. Wade held a string of short-term jobs. He was employed briefly as a forklift driver, a warehouse laborer, and a security guard. Each position ended after a few weeks or months, mostly due to what employers called unsuitability for team environments. Some coworkers recalled conversations in which Wade expressed violent ideation, often masked as jokes. In one chilling moment he reportedly said, "One day they'll see what I'm capable of. One day I'll clean this place up." His fascination with guns emerged in his late 20s. He joined local shooting clubs and began purchasing firearm magazines. In 1991 he legally obtained a Norinco SKS semi-automatic rifle under the pretense of hunting. Despite glaring red flags in his psychological profile, no background check system or mandatory mental health evaluations existed at the time to deny him access. At home, Wade began preparing. He practiced reloading. He stockpiled ammunition. He wrote lists, names, locations, symbolic targets. The walls of his bedroom were adorned with newspaper clippings of mass killings, serial killers, and soldiers. The crown jewel of his obsession was the 1976 film Taxi Driver. He reportedly watched it hundreds of times, obsessing over the character Travis Bickle, whom he viewed not as fiction but as an alter ego, a righteous avenger. In the months leading up to the attack, Wade became almost entirely withdrawn. His mother, increasingly frail, depended on him for groceries and care. He never discussed his inner world. To her he was quiet but dutiful. To himself he was a ticking time bomb with a chosen date. It was a mild and sunny Saturday, August 17, 1991, in Sydney's inner west suburb of Strathfield. Families were out shopping, children running ahead of their parents, elderly couples enjoying cups of tea, and groups of teenagers laughing as they browsed storefronts. Strathfield Plaza, a modest two-story shopping center, was bustling with its usual weekend traffic. Located near the train station, it served as a central hub for locals grabbing groceries, gifts, or simply passing the time. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Wade Frankum left his apartment. He was dressed in dark clothing, carrying a gym bag slung over his shoulder. Inside was a Norinco SKS semi-automatic rifle, a large hunting knife, and boxes of ammunition. He had written a suicide note the night before. Its contents were cryptic, blending resentment, delusion, and a final sense of resolve. Neatly folded on his dresser it read, "The world is an ugly place. I've seen enough." He boarded a train at Enfield Station and disembarked in Strathfield shortly after. Security footage would later show him walking with slow deliberation toward the plaza. He passed mothers with prams, pensioners sitting on benches and shop assistants arranging window displays. No one paid him any mind, he was just another face in the crowd. It was a disarming normalcy masking a meticulously planned nightmare. Frankum entered the Coffee Pot Cafe on the first floor of the plaza around 11:10 a.m. It was a popular breakfast spot, always full on weekends. He ordered a meal, scrambled eggs, toast and a cup of tea, and sat quietly at a corner table. Witnesses later described his demeanor as eerily calm, even serene. He ate slowly, watching the room. He seemed particularly focused on two young women at a nearby table, glancing at them repeatedly. Minutes ticked by. Conversations murmured in the background. The clinking of cutlery and the hiss of the espresso machine mixed with the hum of a fluorescent light overhead. One of the girls smiled politely at Wade after noticing his stare. He looked away. Then he stood. Without a word, he reached into his gym bag and pulled out a large hunting knife. Before anyone could react, he lunged at one of the young women, Patrice Leary, a 15-year-old schoolgirl. The blade pierced her back with brutal force. Screams erupted. He turned to her friend and slashed, the violence sudden and primal. Panicked customers scrambled to flee the cafe, some falling, others ducking beneath tables. Frankum calmly returned to his bag, retrieving the SKS rifle. He loaded it with precision as if in a trance. Then he opened fire. His first gunshots rang out across the food court. Shoppers screamed and dropped to the floor. A 51-year-old woman, Leanne McAvoy, was struck in the head and killed instantly. Another man was hit in the chest while trying to shield his partner. Frankum moved through the plaza like a predator in a confined jungle, firing methodically. Witnesses recalled his face as blank, expressionless, detached from the horror he unleashed. He shot at random, targeting anyone who moved. In the span of just 10 minutes, he killed 6 people and wounded several others. Blood stained the tiled floor. The sound of gunfire echoed across corridors. Parents cried out for their children. Retail staff locked themselves in backrooms, clutching phones that would not connect to emergency services fast enough. By 11:20 a.m., the police had begun receiving multiple emergency calls. Frankum, hearing approaching sirens and sensing his final moments were near, ran up a flight of stairs toward the rooftop parking area. In the chaos, he paused to reload. Then, standing at the top level with a clear view of the plaza's surroundings, he placed the rifle against his chin and pulled the trigger. The bullet shattered his skull instantly. He collapsed on the concrete, his body sprawled beside his empty bag. Chapter 3, 3:27 p.m., the first blow. Without any spoken word or warning, at 3:27 p.m., Frankum stood from his table and reached into his bag. What happened next took mere seconds but changed lives forever. With his right hand, he pulled out the Bowie knife and immediately lunged toward 15-year-old Roberta Armstrong, who had just begun eating with a group of school friends. Frankum stabbed her in the chest, then again and again. The violence was so sudden and vicious that bystanders thought at first it was a prank or fight. But when Armstrong fell to the ground screaming and bleeding, panic erupted. People began to stand, scream, and scramble. A witness later recalled, "There was no hesitation. He just got up and started stabbing. He didn't say a word. His face was blank." He threw the bloodied knife aside and pulled the Norinco SKS rifle from his bag. He racked the bolt back and began firing immediately. The cafe erupted into screams and chaos as bullets tore through air and bodies. Patrons ducked beneath tables, but the cafe offered no cover. The walls were glass, the space was open. Frankum aimed methodically, taking aim and firing at moving targets. He fatally shot 61-year-old Joyce Nixon and her daughter, Patricia Rowe, as they shielded their grandchildren. George Mavris, the cafe's owner, tried to lunge at Frankum from the kitchen but was gunned down. Carol Dickinson, seated by the window, was struck in the head. Rochelle Milburn, a 17-year-old girl, was shot while trying to flee. As bodies fell, the wounded cried for help, bleeding from gunshot wounds to the chest, back, and limbs. Bullet casings clinked onto ceramic tiles. The sound of each shot echoed through the plaza. In less than 2 minutes, Frankum had fired 25 rounds, killing 7 people and wounding several others. Chapter 4, Blood in the Mall. After leaving the cafe, Frankum moved into the mall's main corridor. His expression was blank. Witnesses later said he showed no emotion. No rage, no excitement, just eerie calmness. He began firing again, this time at random. He shot a young man running past a newsstand, wounding him in the arm. He grazed a woman hiding behind a vending machine. Another bullet shattered a glass storefront, injuring an elderly woman behind it. 2 children were injured by flying glass and shrapnel. Shoppers screamed and ran in all directions. Store owners slammed gates shut. Others pulled terrified customers inside and hid them behind counters. Frankum, undeterred, paused occasionally to reload. Surveillance footage later showed him changing magazines with mechanical precision, clearly rehearsed. But something changed. He did not continue killing. Instead, he stopped firing and turned toward the plaza's exit. Outside, he moved to the rooftop car park. There he encountered Michael Wong, a 22-year-old man seated in his Toyota Camry. Frankum ordered him out at gunpoint, but then hesitated and got into the passenger seat instead. He told Michael, "Drive." Wong drove slowly, obeying Frankum's erratic commands. At one point, Frankum mumbled, "I didn't want to do it. I had to do it." He repeated, "I'm sorry." Michael believed Frankum would shoot him at any moment but didn't. Then, as sirens approached, Frankum asked Michael to stop the car near the intersection of Ross Square and Elva Street. He got out of the car, took several steps into the middle of the road, placed the barrel of the rifle under his chin and fired. The bullet exited through his skull, killing him instantly. It was 3:36 p.m. The massacre lasted just 9 minutes. Chapter 5. Carnage and Shock. Police arrived on the scene within minutes, finding the shopping plaza filled with screaming victims, blood, and overturned chairs. EMTs rushed in and began triage. 7 people were pronounced dead. 6 others were rushed to hospitals, 2 in critical condition. Bullet fragments and blood covered the floors of the cafe and mall walkway. Police found Frankum's corpse and weapon on the street, along with an empty magazine and 2 more in his jacket. A handwritten list of names, possibly targets or fantasy victims, was later recovered from his home, though it's unclear if these people were present during the attack. The horror was beyond comprehension. Children were among the injured. Families had been gunned down over lunch. Survivors were left with lifelong trauma. Cafe staff quit en masse. Police cordoned off Strathfield Plaza for 3 days. Chapter 6. The Victims and the Broken Pieces. Roberta Armstrong, 15, a student with dreams of teaching. Her murder was the most brutal. Witnesses say she was stabbed so viciously she didn't stand a chance. A Joyce Nixon, 61, and her daughter Patricia Rowe, 36, both killed while shielding children. A George Mavris, 51, cafe owner, gunned down attempting to intervene. Carol Dickinson, 47, a mother of 2, shot while trying to flee. Rochelle Milburn, 17, described by classmates as artistic and full of energy. E. Robertson Kan Hock Fun, 51, a businessman of Malaysian Chinese heritage, shot while seeking cover. The wounded included a 10-year-old girl with a shattered pelvis, a middle-aged man with a collapsed lung, a teenage boy who never spoke again after witnessing his girlfriend's murder. Funerals were held across New South Wales. The nation mourned. Survivors struggled with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Some never re-entered a shopping mall again. Chapter 7. Australia Awakes. The massacre shocked a nation. Gun control advocates rallied. Police and parliamentarians debated how Frankum, a man with obvious instability, obtained a military-style weapon so easily. Though reforms were proposed immediately after the massacre, they fell short of national action. It was not until 5 years later, in 1996, following the Port Arthur massacre, that Australia enacted sweeping gun reform under Prime Minister John Howard. The seeds of that action, however, were sown in Strathfield, where the illusion of Australian immunity to mass shootings was shattered. Chapter 8. Legacy and Shadows. Strathfield Plaza remains open. It has changed over the years, but the memory lingers. For those who were there that day, victims, first responders, witnesses, it is a scar that never fully heals. A small plaque stands nearby, inscribed with the names of those lost. Frankum left behind no manifesto, no final words. His actions remain a mystery, whether they were fueled by deep-seated psychosis, delusion, or nihilism. But his impact is indelible. The massacre transformed public consciousness, initiated the first modern debate about mass shootings in Australia, and made Strathfield forever synonymous with one of the darkest days in the nation's history.